Do, 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 do. Dina says, go ahead. So here we are going ahead. Hello, Chicagoland, and welcome to the first session of January of 2019 of Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group. I am your host and chairman, Mark Vogt. I've been doing this for a couple of years. We are going into what I think is our third season now, and I'm super excited. One of the things I'm excited about is that I'm looking at the names coming in, and I only recognize a few of them, which means we're continuing to show growth in this particular virtualized user system, and that makes me excited. We've got an interesting schedule coming up today. It's not a huge agenda. We were trying to give some time for some genuine discussion to happen on some of these topics. Let's get started right away. Our agenda for today is we're going to be talking a little bit about a new talk show sort of format that we're calling O365 Chicago. It's the brainchild of Craig Jahnke and myself from a couple of weeks ago, and we want to talk a bit about it. We're going to also let Craig talk about a brand new users group that is the Chicago PowerApps and Flow users group that actually has its second session coming up this Thursday, tomorrow night downtown, and he'll talk about that shortly. Then we'll go through some of our normal topics, SharePoint news and events, which is a little light right today. Office 365 news and events with Michael Blumenthal, one of our regular guest speakers. Ralph will talk about the SharePoint framework news and events. Then we've got a couple presentations. One has to be postponed, but I'm going to be doing a demo or a presentation on SharePoint Server 2019, a first install, where I'm going to just literally whip through a bunch of screenshots of what that install looked like for me, for those of you that are curious. Lastly, we're going to have an open discussion that I hope takes a good third of the meeting today to talk about covering Angular single page applications for SharePoint, what I'll call SharePoint.anything, meaning any version of SharePoint. If you're still on premises versions, I want to start teeing up with the next couple of months where the sessions are going to look like, where we look at best practices, techniques, tips, everything for building single page apps, not with older versions of Angular, but actually with the newest versions of Angular and what that might mean or how useful that might be for the group. So let's dive into it all. A couple of weeks ago, Craig Jahnke and I started brainstorming about some needs we saw in Chicago. And one thing that popped into our head was, with the increase in people attending these sessions on a monthly basis, it made a lot of sense that we should start opening up on even a weekly basis some kind of a, I don't know what to call it except a talk show. Craig got the idea of O365Chicago.com, registered the name. The basics are going to be, we're going to be open for 30 minutes on Tuesdays for anybody to actually come in, make a connection. We'll provide you guys with all the detail. And if you've got questions that week, we're going to try to cover those in that open forum, and we're going to see where it goes. Hopefully that's going to stick. We're going to evolve and guide on an as needed basis. But we're seeing that even in other parts of the country, this kind of a format, call in on a regular basis, not having to wait an entire month. And we'll talk in the meantime, of course we will. But if there's questions that people have, we're going to pounce on them at Tuesdays at lunchtime and make ourselves available to people. We'll have guests calling in or guests coming in on the show, so to speak, to talk every single Tuesday, and it'll become just a regular practice, and we'll see how far we get. Greg, did I say anything there that you weren't prepared to actually say yes to? Did I make promises?
Yeah, so I think we'll open it up with Microsoft is ever evolving. Oh, hi, I'm Craig, by the way, if you didn't recognize the voice. But Microsoft has been rolling out so many news and updates, so we'll probably spend the first 5 minutes covering the news of the week. And then, as Mark said, kind of discussing what maybe we're working on, and if anybody happens to attend and they have questions, we can obviously answer anything or try our best to answer, or research and point you in the directions of who you should talk to find the answers to what's going on with what you're working on. The other part of that was the Office365.com. That's a website that we're going to be working on building out, where not only can you get information about Office 365, what we do, but I'm trying to bring in some of the other user groups in the Chicago area to be the go-to place so that you can find information on where you might want to get other resources. Because like Michael's going to be talking later, Michael's got an Office 365 user adoption group. I know I've got a PowerApps group. I run SharePoint Saturday. There's some Windows servers groups. There's some Power BI groups, and just started kind of putting a list together.
Another Office 365 user group.
Yeah, so just kind of putting all that in one place where somebody in Chicago can kind of go and get the most relevant information of what's going on in the Chicagoland area in regards to Office 365, and in more regards, what's going on in the Microsoft universe, right? So there might be some Azure and stuff like that.
Sounds like a Chicago knowledge base of information.
That's what I'm hoping to build it out to.
Cool. All right, at least if you guys can offer us some feedback, the people that are attending today, and it looks like we've got, gosh, about 16 or 17, 19 people actually showing up. Let us know what your thoughts are on the talk show, on the knowledge base. What we're trying to do is actually find supplements of what's been going on for the last 3 years now. The Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group has found itself already branching off into Michael Blumenthal's Office 365 Users Group. Now it's branched off into Craig Jahnke's PowerApps and Flow Users Group, but we want to keep them together. And what I see tying all of that together are going to be that knowledge base and that Office 365 Chicago.com regular Tuesday, again, talk show for lack of another name. Let's continue. I'm seeing a couple of questions go in. When we get to the point where I can step away to answer them, I will. Craig, segueing over to you, there's a new user group in town. It had its inaugural session last month. It's going into the beginning of 2019 now. It's called the Chicago PowerApps and Flow Users Group, and Craig Jahnke is the founder and host. Craig, what do you want to tell everybody about it?
Yeah, so if you haven't been paying attention to what's going on in Office 365, PowerApps is become huge. It's been a little bit growing out of the Dynamics, actually more out of Dynamics CRM if people have been using it more, and Flow. PowerApps is kind of the new how to create a simple or create apps quickly, takes the place of like a forms-based generator. Quickly user, it's more looking at end users and power users to be able to create them instead of having to go into a full-on development and have your programmers do it. So it's kind of a user-friendly. It's still a little bit complicated, but it's a more user-friendly way for our super users to create applications that they need to get their job done. And then Flow is kind of replaced, is the workflow. So PowerApps, what is it called? InfoPath kind of takes the place of InfoPath, and then Flow is a workflow type of tool that takes place of the SharePoint Diviner workflows. And there's a lot of development coming out of Microsoft for that. A lot of connectors. You can just connect into various different platforms. It doesn't even have to be in the Microsoft universe to do that. You can do a lot of stuff. So if you haven't heard about it, it's coming quickly, and it's really great for business process automation. A really great way to help develop that in your Office 365 environments. So that's what we're focusing on. And Mark, as he said on the first session, gave a great presentation about an app that he developed that basically it's a credit scoring app that somebody can take to like a trade show and put in user information, and it spits out some, it takes the data and it goes out and does machine language and some cognitive services and kind of can determine what a person's credit should be. And there was a whole workflow around that. So that was a great presentation. I really appreciate you doing that. Next Thursday, that will be our second meeting. I think you have a slide with the link to the meetup, Mark. Did you say you created that, or was I not paying attention?
I didn't get it squeezed in, but what you can do, Craig, is repost it.
On news and upcoming event.
Oh, Mike, you're going to have it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
So that's a meetup. It happens at the Concurrency office downtown on the corner of Randolph and Wacker. I happen to be a technical architect for Concurrency. So if you want to go and be in person, I will be there with whoever shows up. Else, we will stream it live too. So if you register for the event, we will put the Teams. We'll do it through Teams, and I'll send out the link before the meeting. So that will have an option too. So you can either be on premises for the meetup or you can be remote. So I get that going downtown in January is not the easiest thing for people to do.
Craig, I did post the link to the entire audience using the WebEx chat tool right now, or rather the GoToWebinar. So that'll get followed up by Mike. Cool.
And then, so that's that group. The next thing that I had was the next event coming up is called the Power Platform World Tour. If you haven't noticed that, Microsoft has been doing, and I'll post a link to that in the chat. Microsoft is doing a small conference. It's mostly powered by Microsoft and the user groups in that area for Power BI, PowerApps, and Flow. They will be downtown Chicago, April 9th and 10th is their main conference. It's like $399 to go to that. It is going to have it'll have four tracks for business users, new users, couple of technical users, and then just kind of a generic. We didn't know where they fit in, but that will have a lot of Power BI, getting started with Power BI, how you do a lot of stuff with Power BI, dashboards and that, and also have some how do you create Power Apps, and it will have Flow too. So that's what Microsoft is calling the Power Platform now, Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow. So you'll have a bunch of sessions on that, bunch of great speakers. I believe Mark will probably be one of those speakers. So he submitted, and I'm pretty sure it's going to get selected. So there'll be more information on that as it gets closer, but you want to put that on the calendar. And April 8th, there will be a full day workshop where I'll be doing a session, at least I will be doing a session on getting started with Flow and how you can use it to make business apps. So, and then rounding it off, SharePoint Saturday, if you don't know about that, is it's a free session on Saturday. We're going to be May 4th. I think Michael has a little bit more information on that. But it's May 4th at the DeVry in Addison. It goes basically from 9 a.m. sessions for a bunch of tracks, bunch of speakers talking on everything to do with Office 365 or Azure will be covered there. And that, again, is May 4th from 9 a.m. till about 3 p.m. And
for those of you, for anybody that hasn't attended a SharePoint Saturday in the suburbs, you're in for a treat. This has seen increasing growth in the last couple of years. It's been Craig and a couple of Craig, Mike, Tony, and a host of other founders that have gradually grown this thing out till there are hundreds and hundreds of attendees every single session, and they're actually asking for a fall session and the spring session. I think you guys missed out on the fall session this year, but everybody's looking forward to the May spring one, aren't they?
Yeah, we've already got quite a few signups. We just got K2 came on board as a sponsor. We're still looking for sponsors. I posted a link to that in the chat. So again, if you're looking to hear, and it's free, right? So kind of free if you just want to attend. We also have lunch. Usually a lunch is a small personal pizza and a salad and a Coke or soft drink from Lou Malnati's. We charge $20 for lunch. So that is the only thing. Otherwise, it's just it's a free event for anybody who wants to come in and get some knowledge that you wouldn't get unless you went to a conference. Bunch of great speakers. We usually have about 25, 30 different speakers, depending on who gets selected, who submitted, and they're all volunteers. So really, nobody gets paid. So
in fact, I remember some people flying all the way over from the East Coast. They came in for this particular session, didn't they?
Yeah, we get some people from all over the world, all over the country, not world. I wish it was the world, but yeah, some people from the West Coast. Some we usually have about 10 to 12 MVPs. Michael's an MVP. He will be there. He will be speaking. Some of the regional MVPs. So really good list of people, and we'll be putting out the sessions that'll be there kind of at the end of this week. I'm going to make an initial first cut.
All right, good to know. Craig, thanks for all the input on there. Everybody, you know that there's another user group in town coming up, so now you got 3 that you get to sit in on. Let's continue our slides. In the interest of time, I'm actually skipping the SharePoint news and events. I think that they've actually been covered quite well by Craig right now and also by Mike in just a few moments. So we're going to segue over into Office 365 news and events. Mike, I'm ready to hand over to you in 3, 2, 1, and you are now the presenter.
Hello, everyone.
Looks good.
Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Michael Blumenthal. I am our group's resident MVP. I'm also the IT product manager for Office 365 at West Monroe Partners, a consulting firm, business and IT consulting here in Chicago. and I'm going to cover Office 365 news and announcements. First the news, and then upcoming events. So the latest Office 365 news, just as a highlight of a couple different things, by no means comprehensive. Recently announced for Microsoft Teams is that the Planner add-in for Teams, that is when you add Planner to a Teams channel as a tab, when someone gets a task assigned to them in Planner and it's on a tab, starting soon, they will get a notification. The way that works under the hood is that Microsoft is deploying a Planner bot, which will send that person a chat message saying something to the effect of, hey, you've been assigned a task. That's going to roll out rather slowly. Microsoft said in their latest Message Center announcement in the Office 365 Message Center that it will roll out between February and July. So it's maybe a while before it actually arrives at your tenant. Should the end user find those notifications annoying, the way that they mute them is by going to the chat conversations and muting that bot. That's different than the other notification controls that you have. So that's Planner notifications coming to Teams. The next announcement is about a new user experience in OneDrive for when users are syncing either OneDrive or SharePoint folders. Should a user mass delete a large number of files, they will now get a warning saying you recently deleted, as you can see here in the corner, some number of files. Do you really want to remove them, or do you want to undo what you just did? And so that adds an extra level of, are you sure you want to do that before someone goes and removes an entire document library thinking they're just cleaning up their machine? Another announcement in Flow in OneDrive is that there will soon be flows available in OneDrive that offer two capabilities. One is copying as a PDF. So let's say you have a Word document and you can kick off a flow that will turn it into a PDF. And it'll also be an approval request flow that you can run. So those are out-of-the-box flow templates that will be available for OneDrive. Also recently announced is that Stream, which is the video hub for Office 365. Stream is the new video portal. It replaces Office 365 Video. We do today have both video portals in our tenant, and most tenants still have both. They have started a opt-in migration from Office 365 Video to Stream. Stream is the one that is going to stick around and be invested in. Office 365 Video is going away. As part of Stream maturing, it now has mobile apps available for iOS and Android. So this is where you put your corporate videos, and so now your staff, your end users can access those videos on their mobile device as well. Another announcement, new icons are coming. So Microsoft made a big announcement that they're modernizing the icons for the Office suite. You can see here Outlook, OneDrive, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote. This one is SharePoint, not Sway, Teams, Yammer, and Skype. And so you'll slowly over time, over the next couple months, see the mobile apps changing over to these icons. You'll see the Office.com user experience change over to these icons. You'll see these icons show up throughout the suite.
Boy, that's about time, isn't it?
You can go and find in some of these announcements about the new icons a historical look back, and you can see the Office 2000 icons, Office 2003, Office 2007, how they've evolved over time, and so now this is actually a screenshot from a video where they talk a little bit about the design philosophy of these icons.
I'm even hoping we shift to a 2-letter designation so we don't have a couple of different S's out there. We'll see.
You'll notice someone pointed out that in the Excel icon, the L is subtly present.
I see. Okay. Now, are you making that up that you see that, like people that see shadows with shapes in them, or is that really Microsoft's intent?
Good question. I'm not making it up. Someone else observed it. Whether that was the designer intent or not, I do not know.
I see the O in PowerPoint.
We'll see.
Note has the T.
Yeah, but SharePoint, well, SharePoint has 3 points.
Yeah, I heard that was for, I don't know if it was intentional, but for OneDrive teams and SharePoint online or collaboration sites.
All right, good to see. Michael, what else you got for us?
So upcoming events, we've talked about most of this already. This is just reiteration of the things that Craig is up to and promoting and driving. The Power Platform usergroups.com/Chicago, or and that's the PowerApps and Flow user group. And as they said, meeting is on the 31st here, with the world tour thing being April 9th and 10th. Then my next user group, the meeting, the Office 365 Adoption user group meeting, is February 7th, 9 a.m. in Microsoft Downers Grove. Our topic for that meeting is Microsoft Search and Office 365. You may have previously heard of this referred to as Bing for Business. We have David Gilbert giving us a presentation on this. David is one of our members who's actually had a chance to play around with the technology.
Cool. So is that one going to be recorded?
We try to record all of them.
Okay.
Some record better than others. We have a YouTube channel where we've got a couple of them out there. Our event at SharePoint Fest this last month, December, is the recording is out there. We also have from last year, we have a recording of Caruana Gatimu's presentation. We had between those 2 times, we had a discussion on champions programs that did not lend itself well to the recording, and so that and we had some recording issues when we were recording it, so that one's not up there. But we do try to record most of that. Plus, if you can't get to Downers Grove, you can dial in. And so if you go to our meetup page, you use that URL, O365 Adoption User Group Chicago Meetup, and that is case sensitive. I apologize for that. That'll take you to our meetup page.
All right, sounds good.
SharePoint Saturday, as Craig said, May the 4th be with us. And this call for speakers and sponsors is open too. And I'm going to add to what Craig said and say, if you've got expertise that you've developed and would like to share, please submit to be a speaker. If you would like to sponsor, I'm sure Craig would like more sponsors. You can find that at spsevents.org, and please plan to attend.
Sounds good, Mike. So we've got 3 users. Yeah, we've got 3 users groups in January, 3 users groups in February. We got 3 users groups in March. We've got events starting in April, events in May. What's it all tell you? Chicago is going to be a really fun place to do SharePoint related stuff this whole first quarter. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Mike. I'm going to take over the screen again.
Go ahead.
Hey, just a little quick thing to tag on what Michael said for my SharePoint Saturday group. It's a great place if you've never really spoken before. It's a nice place to get your feet wet, right? Or any of the user group meetings that we're going on. If you've ever got an interest in speaking, just reach out to either me, Mark, or Mike. We are always looking for speakers to talk on new topics, and these user groups are a great forum to get your feet wet.
Yep. And one thing you guys will notice is we've had guys even in this last year, 2018, that come up, they just demonstrate on the fly. If you've got a solution you're particularly proud of, everybody's got that same problem and you've got the solution and you want to give some tips and tricks, that is exactly what this users group is all about. We're here to present information, quite all right, if there are no other demos, but it's really by the members for the members. It's you guys sharing information and us trying to create this monthly environment where we all can get together and actually share that information. So without saying any more, I'm going to dive into a few SPFx news and event stuff. Ralph wasn't able to come today, busy, but he was wanted me to have these bullet points. One, the SharePoint framework 1.7.1 is released. That fixes some bugs from 1.7, but not the ones that people unhappy. Watch for the next one. There's actually some updates required to the Node.js that runs underneath it. We use, let's see, there's a push in the community to take advantage of community-built tools, column formatting, etc. There's no real big changes just recently. The momentum now is getting ready for version 1.8. Ralph's going to have some more information on us coming up, and he promises that next month he's going to really show us what's going on inside the EMS Graph. Segueing into that, we had to postpone this one until the next session. Everybody should know that we're all working during the day, and sometimes we just get so busy that we can't pull away even for half an hour. What I want to do next for the next 20 minutes, hopefully a lot sooner than that, is give you guys a first install on SharePoint Server 2019. This entire users group is about all versions of SharePoint, whether you're purely on-premise, whether you're purely in the cloud, or whether you're somewhere in between where you are running a hybrid environment. What everybody probably needs to take a look at is that the last quarter of the year, SharePoint Server 2019 came out. I haven't had a chance to actually show everybody what a first install looks like. So that's one thing that I wanted to present today. And then in the February and the March sessions, I'm going to dive into some of the features that are new there, in particular the ones related to hybrid. So the short story is, actually, I'm not going to show the short story first. I'm going to go and bring up some slides here. Give me just a second. And I'm bringing them up right now. Can somebody tell me if they can see that that particular screenshot popped up?
Yes, you're good.
Installing SharePoint 29 here. So what I did, everybody, was on a little virtual machine. I got this one ready, and you'll see in the middle of the screen, I've got Windows Server 2012 R2 Standard Edition. For those of you that know what's about to happen, don't jump ahead and tell everybody. But this is what I expected to be able to use. SQL 2014, Windows Server 2012, and I just launched into a little virtual machine, triggered a single server. What I wanted to do is see if the installer really changed, if the configuration, that initial stand-up, changed appreciably. Everybody's talking about the tools, but a lot of times what we care about when we're the administrators, et cetera, is did the underlying administration change appreciably? Is there a new learning curve that I got to work on? Let's take a look. So here we are on this one little server, getting it all ready. I went into the Microsoft site, downloaded the latest sample of SharePoint Server 2019. We see that right here, dated October last year, so just 2 months old. Downloaded it. That's what it actually is going to look like, the 64-bit edition. Grabbed the key while I was at it. Can't show you guys the key. The first thing you do when you bring down that ISO is that you got to mount it. We all knew that. And then we get ready to actually run. I mistakenly grabbed the setup.exe and ran it as an administrator. You're going to end up actually seeing a little bit of an error because it tells me, first thing, you need Server 2016 or above to be able to run SharePoint 2019. So for those of you that were already wondering what was going to change in your world, you're going to have to upgrade the OS on all of your servers. If you're running in 2016, if you're running in 2013, you need to take those operating systems up to Windows Server 2016, standard or enterprise, whatever. So after I actually upgraded this entire machine to Server 2016, and surprisingly, it took less than 15 minutes to do a full upgrade in place. I was really pleased and surprised by how stable that was. Here I am back in Windows Server 2016 Standard Edition, same machine, 15 minutes later. We go back into mounting that ISO file. We get to run the setup.command file, not setup.exe, and that's what actually launches this little starter page, this splash screen that I think everybody should actually go through. And what do you do? Those of you that have been working on this in the past, you already know you're going to actually run that install software prereqs again and again, a couple of different times until it comes back clean, telling you all is well with your world. And that's exactly what I did as well. It ran it through all of these different prerequisites. And if I really go down the list and look, I could scarcely see hardly anything except maybe an app fabric that was getting added to the mix. And we'll talk more about that later. So here I am doing the installation, just like you're used to seeing all the way back to 2001 practically. We're installing some .NET framework, some cumulative update packages, etc. This app fabric comes into play. We whip through all of this. It's adding some stuff related to Visual Studio as well. Then it does a restart. It comes back, tells me everything is ready to actually go. I took a screenshot of all the prereqs I had to install on this machine just so you've got it. Once that's done, it's going to actually restart the machine, and I get to restart the PS. Let's see, I remounted it, reran it. The prereqs are in place now. It's time to start the SharePoint server. And here's what we end up seeing. The installation is complete when I'm done. Goes pretty fast. Actually, the whole thing, elapsed time probably was less than 15 minutes to walk away from. And then you typically launch into the psconfig UI that you have to actually stand up something. And hopefully I'll be able to bless player. Oh, I already blurred out the product key so nobody can guess it. Great. You accept the terms. You choose a file location. And I'm thinking at this point, everybody, this looks like SharePoint 2007. This looks like SharePoint 2010. Looks like 2013. Looks like 2016. So far, so good. You're doing some installation. You're running the configuration wizard. And then I saw this, and I swear I haven't seen this in 2 generations of SharePoint, where you're actually going back to a role-specific configuration again. What's the big takeaway? We'll talk about that in a previous slide. But instead of putting all the bits and bytes on every single server and then having it simply be a different role, you get to select the individual role, and it's doing a min role installation of those particular bits and bytes on that particular server for that particular role. If we go down the list here, we see that there's a front end, installs the service apps, the services components. There's an application role that actually adds service application services and components. There's a distributed cache. There's a search tool. Even the distributed cache needs a little bit more of a look. That's going to be for an upcoming session. There's a front end with distributed cache. There's application with search if you're trying to combine roles and duties on a small to medium sized farm. Ultimately, I ended up going with the single server farm. No surprise, I only got the one machine. So here I am doing the single server farm. I went with the basics, NTLM, took the port number that they already specified, put in a passphrase. Nobody saw that. Pretend you didn't see that. Oh, I got one extra here. It's looking at the config database. I took all of the sample set, the default settings that were already there, and it starts whizzing through those 10 tasks. Typically, it's going to stop on one of them for a while. Usually it's 8 or 9, something like this, but you get configuration successful. And what was the only thing that really changed? It was that selection of all the different min roles was actually unusual from previous versions. If you were in 2010 and 2013, etc., you didn't see that. Now I'm actually diving into central administration to finish standing up the very first root site collection, but I'm also keen to see if there's any other services that got added here. I see app management, BDCS, Lotus Notes connectors, translators, project server, search service, usage health. All this stuff looks really, really familiar from past versions. I dive in and stand up my initial site collection, and we're done. We end up with a nice, healthy central administration. If I actually go into the root website of that site collection I stood up, that's when I start to see things getting interesting, and we see this more updated, current look and feel, that new look and feel in terms of editing all the different web parts that are on the page. And we're going to start diving into that more in upcoming sessions in February and in March. But what I wanted to show you guys was all of those key items here of what it looked like to go through an entire install. So I'm going to get rid of that screenshot, and we're going to go back into the slide deck where the big upshot of the last 79 slides is SharePoint 2019 looks a lot like SharePoint 2016. SharePoint 2016 looks a lot like 2013. This is a good thing. Why? Because collaboration is maturing. It's reaching that kind of a peak where everybody has an expectation about what SharePoint could look like. On top of it, they're taking, where they're expanding it is that they're giving it the mobile interface now, so that it's looked better than ever in a browser. It's starting to become just commonplace to be interacting with your SharePoint environment on a phone as well. Because the collaboration is maturing, the focus hasn't been on that UI, on that UX. It hasn't really been on access. It's actually been on trying to stand up hybrid spaces where you got part of your environment up in the cloud, part of your environment down on premises, because you're finding out that your on-premises environment may be actually preventing you from collaborating with some of the people that are not in your organization, unless you cooked up some kind of a homegrown solution. So that's where I think it's all gone. I like what I've seen. I like the fact that under the hood, it still is the same old SharePoint. There's some things they could have probably improved on in the administration, but they didn't. That still makes it familiar, and I'm okay with that. Interesting and cool to note, SharePoint 2019 is returned to this individual roles called the min roles. This screen is the only thing I saw that was really, truly different than in recent previous versions of SharePoint. that you're actually pointing out specific server roles and identifying them and then installing only minimal bits and bytes. The reason you're doing all of this is you're trying to minimize the total amount of code that's sitting on any one server. Why? Because the more code you put on, the more potential holes there are in being able to penetrate it. So if you're trying to harden a particular machine, you're going to try to turn it into an appliance. What's an appliance? It's running only the minimal software absolutely required for that particular role. And that makes it easier to try to harden. It makes it easier to try to actually tune that particular role inside that appliance for that particular role. So I hope you guys found that useful. What I'd love to spend the next 25 minutes doing is actually looking ahead. We've got an organization, this users group, that actually has told us repeatedly they have a lot of people that are still in on-premises versions of SharePoint for the foreseeable future, which means as they're being told InfoPath is going to reach end of life, everybody needs to go to PowerApps, everybody needs to go to Microsoft Flow, their hands are tied. It gives them very few options to actually understand where they should be going to try to come up with a new version of forms, a new versions of workflow. And that begs the question, if you got all these custom developers out there, and what everybody's been working on these days is some version of an MVC, a model view controller type of technology. If there was a push over the last 10 years in this product called Angular, but now there's a really old version of Angular, and then there's a new sexy version. If there's this push into SPA, single page apps, so that basically you could build solutions that can be installed and deployed to what I'll call SharePoint.anything. What do you guys, our members here, the 16 people, now it's actually gone up to 21 people. So we just had 5 people join in the last 10 minutes, this particular call. What I want to do is open the phones up, open the microphones up, so to, in other words, and ask you guys, what do you want us to cover in the next 3 sessions about Angular? Do you want us to cover the basics? Do you want us to cover best practices? Do you want to see some sample templates? Do you just want to see some ideas? Do you want step-by-step checklists for how to actually build and code your first Angular apps and what language you should be using, maybe what toolkits you should be using? Give us some idea. Deanna and Edie, can you guys open up the microphones and see if there's anybody that wants to talk about it?
Yep, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. So if you do not wish to speak, you can go ahead and mute yourself. So give me 1 second and go down the list here. And you'll see that you have been unmuted if you want to provide your 2 cents to Mark about interest in Angular 7. Jay, I just sent you a pin because it looks like you need to enter that if you wish to speak. And we're working through.
And again, what we're trying to accomplish here to this users group is, let's say you know you need to get off InfoPath and PowerApps and Flow is not an option for you. It's not on your company's technology roadmap for the foreseeable future. I see, and I think a lot of people would agree, building single page apps are probably the way to go. And what if you're going to go to single page apps, you're probably going to use Angular. And if you're going to use Angular as well, try to bring in the latest stuff, which would probably be Angular 6 and Angular 7, as opposed to earlier versions of Angular, and try to solidify on that, try to standardize on that for the next couple of years, and it would be time well spent. But what do you guys think?
May I contradict you?
Oh, feel free. This is a discussion. Reasonable people can disagree on this point.
Because the new visuals, the modern page, so to speak, is using React, and there's a lot of usage of the React material design. I think we better go with React because it's already part of what the users are loading in their browsers, instead of going Angular and adding another layer into the mix. And
It's
React,
point,
as
isn't
far
it?
as excuse me?
I'm listening carefully to you. Let me throw a thought back at you. You're talking about the new version. You're talking about the new look and feel, that it has React on there. What if you don't even get that? What if you're on SharePoint 2013 for the next 2 years? Then what do you do? Would you consider rewriting everything that you've been doing in Angular, rewriting it in React to try to create or set the stage, I guess, for a smooth transition to, say, SharePoint 2019 when the time comes?
No, if you already started with Angular, all the best to you. You should continue with that. But if you're looking to change from jQuery to something better, then I would go with React, because at one point you're going to go with modern pages after that.
Have you ever had any experience in actually, let's say, transitioning from an Angular-based solution to a React-based solution? Has that been handed to you as any kind? I don't know how many people that are members today have actually had that experience where we had to convert from one version of an MVC solution to a different version.
I don't know about that.
Anybody out there? You know, 3 years ago, everybody was struggling to try to decide, you know, where's the puck heading? Are we going to stick with Angular? It just shifted into 6 and 7. It's looking pretty good. React came out. Everybody's wondering if that's the next new thing. Like you mentioned, 2019 actually contains a lot of DNA that's React-based. But what if you're still back in 2013, 2016? What do you do to continue to derive utility out, but still set yourself up where, you know, like with, let's say, Angular 2 to Angular 7, you're doing a total rewrite of your applications. There was no smooth path to get from earlier versions of Angular to the current versions of Angular. You had to rewrite everything. Arg. What's been other people's experiences out there? Artem, Dan, Dave, Dennis, Donna, Eric, Jay, Oswaldo, Patrick, Scott, Song May, Tom. Are you guys? How many people are out there already building single page apps as part of their on-premises solutions? I'm curious to know.
Not well. I can tell you that with 55,000 users, excuse me, and last time I checked it was, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
And for the rest of the audience, you're with?
Allstate.
Okay, go ahead.
Last time I checked, we had 7 terabytes of information just on SharePoint. We moved into a hybrid situation because there was a lot of personal information that we wanted to keep in-house. And we're constantly going back and forth on this. And I'd really like to hear what other folks have to say, especially in a hybrid environment.
Scott, you said you guys shifted to a hybrid environment when?
About a year ago.
So you guys are running what, 2016 plus Office 365?
Correct.
And a fully hybrid environment, or you're just dabbling with pieces of it that have been hybrid enabled, let's call it?
No, full hybrid, including
full
search.
Hybrid. Yeah. Did you guys find this?
Hybrid, is this Exchange hybrid? Is this Skype hybrid? Which workloads are hybrid?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Which workloads are hybrid? Is it SharePoint just hybrid, or is it also Exchange hybrid, or Skype for Business hybrid?
Right now, it's everything. We're moving everybody up to the cloud for Exchange Online. All of the non-essential, non-personal information has been moved up to the cloud. But for all practical purposes, all the services are being run hybrid.
Thank you for clarifying.
When you guys started building solutions, keeping us on track about, hey, we're being told by Microsoft that we don't get InfoPath, that the sunset is coming, guys. So everything we've been using to build relatively nice looking forms for our solutions that live inside SharePoint are now going away. But we're being told that the only option is this thing called PowerApps, and PowerApps actually requires, at least so far, access to a hybrid environment minimum, Office 365 maximum, and we're not ready to shift there. Our technology roadmap doesn't say that. So now we're back in the world of building single page apps and wanting to use an MVC type of model system. Some of the guys from AT&T, I know you guys said, even in our December session, that you guys had built tons of Angular-based applications. What version of Angular were you using? The older version or the newer versions? Anybody? Anybody from AT&T out there that wants to talk?
Yeah, this is Tom. I'm not building anything. Patrick would be the expert from AT&T.
Patrick's on, but I think he's being quiet today.
Okay, Patrick's got a mute on. If we're looking ahead, if my real goal here as the host chairman is to try to understand what kind of topics we want to bring into February, into March, even into April, that are related to building single-page applications on, let's say for the moment, on a SharePoint on-premises platform that is not in the foreseeable future shifting gears. It's not upgrading to any newer version that opens up the stage to React. Then I'm still of a mindset that Angular 7 probably represents the best feature set so far. What are other people actually experimenting with in your own environments? You're on premise and you're building single page apps and you're trying to stay away from InfoPath. Or let me know, are you guys actually still working in InfoPath and kind of wondering, what's the next step actually going to look like? Is that where everybody's at?
Yeah, if you don't wish to speak, you can go ahead and submit your information through the question pane. Looks like Patrick shot something over from AT&T as well.
Mark, this is Dan.
Yeah.
And we currently we're on 2013 and have using InfoPath forms. And I'd asked the question in the chat earlier because I like seeing where things are going, knowing that we'll probably not be able to go to 2016 till budget of next year, or moving forward. And I was crossing my fingers hoping that I could coast on InfoPath till we got to the upper levels of things. So that's kind of where I was hoping that I could kind of continue what I was doing. And if we moved over to 2016, that the forms would still work until I went to when you talk about this single page apps. Honestly, I didn't know that existed. I never had seen it to look for it. And so when you guys wrote that, I went, oh, what is this thing? And so that's the first introduction that I knew that there was something other than InfoPath or Flow.
Does anybody want to actually toss up a quick explanation of a single page app company? I can do it. Imagine you built a responsive application that lives inside the body of a SharePoint page, so that the SharePoint page takes on that oh so sought after responsive aspect, but you could argue you've actually avoided any additional licensing fees that is actually coming with doing that same kind of app using PowerApps. Now you're stepping into the world where you're using the cutting edge best practices to build web applications, but you're finding a way to actually embed them in your SharePoint pages, even on earlier versions of SharePoint, 2013, 2016, heck, probably get away with 2010. And you're building potentially very sexy web apps, which means you've got people that are coming into the company that are no longer thinking, oh, I'm using all these archaic skills to go and build my applications inside this critter called SharePoint. Instead, they're using cutting edge skills to build cutting edge applications inside what is now perceived as a cutting edge container for their applications called SharePoint. Not just cutting edge in terms of a container of their app, but it's a container of all the content, and the APIs are so rich that the Angular applications have no trouble interacting via REST or any other API with the rest of SharePoint, and you suddenly have the best of both worlds. You have access to all of the content, all of the security, all the other services, the rich APIs that are available in SharePoint, but you get to build web apps using cutting edge technologies and frameworks that should be around for quite some time to come. And it's been my understanding that the Angular, starting around Angular 6, they made a concerted, well, actually even beyond that, even slightly before that, they made a concerted effort to make the path going into new versions of Angular continue to be seamless, as opposed to demanding a rewrite like they've had to do in the past. Dan, you're already convincing me it's time to start doing some Angular demos in February and March. Would that be time well spent, do you think?
I think so. And I think for me, I might be, I'm just not quite grasping it all yet. Is this type of thing overkill for basically, I want to grab some information from users in a pretty way to do it, and then just capture that and do something based on that. Is that
I'd have to say,
what this would do?
You can do that in Flow now.
you can do it in Flow, but again, we're limiting ourselves,
But I
guys.
can't
The
get
minute we
to
say
Flow yet.
Flow, we're forcing people into a hybrid environment. That's not possible for all of our members. But I can tell you this, Dan, with the SinglePage apps, there are enough libraries available now that a lot of the stuff that normally you had to use a tool like InfoPath to quickly build a form that was visually appealing and easy to use. Now it's very, very possible to do that with Angular code that's already pre-generated. Like imagine a rich command set that it already has objects for being able to build forms out very, very quickly. But it's not in lingo that only SharePoint propeller heads understand, like InfoPath. Instead, it's a bunch of stuff that that any application developer in your company will look and say, oh, I've been doing that for years, but we're doing it on a regular web server. Now you're telling me I can do that inside SharePoint and I can access the SharePoint content as well? That's the cat's meow, especially for building forms that have, let's say, repeating sections where there's like you're adding form line or entries to an expense report or something like this. Angular really starts to shine in those areas, and they've canned so much of the functionality that for all intents and purposes, I perceive it when my developers are showing me stuff, we're doing a code walkthrough, it feels like it is a solid replacement to the InfoPath functionality that allows you to build the forms.
That'd be neat to see. And
Yeah,
I'll be going down the rabbit hole the next couple of days looking on that too.
All right, yeah, you're going to be looking for Angular 7 and SPAs for SharePoint. But what I'm going to be thinking is, upcoming in February and March, we're going to literally have, I'll call it the SPA mini series. It's going to be 101. It's going to be in February, and it's going to be SPAs and Angular, followed by a 102 and maybe even a 103, or a 101 and a 201 and a 301 on the stuff that you can do with these Angular apps inside SharePoint. Because
that'd be really neat.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to feel pretty good about that. I'm seeing that I'm doing a quick time check here. I've got a couple of questions that still don't get answered right now.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, if you have a minute, I'd like to bring something here.
Feel free. Go ahead.
Hey, okay. Hey, everyone. This is Abbas from Cardinal Health. It's a company here in Dublin, Ohio. Hey, we are in middle of this huge migration, and I'm working with 1,600 plus sites to get them migrated to SharePoint Online. I just want to see, like, anybody had any experience with Nintex, moving them from SharePoint 2010 to SharePoint Online, because we estimated a number, and that number is nowhere close to what I can get it done when it comes to Nintex. And also we have something called as Quick Apps. Previously it was owned by not Agria, but Dell Quick Apps, not Dell, and I don't remember Quest, and now it's been owned by a company called Agria. So that's another add-on. Those are all great tools, but once the complexity is really when we want to migrate them to SharePoint Online. Just to give you guys an idea, like if you guys don't know, like today we have an enterprise license, like a one perpetual server license. Tomorrow in SharePoint Online, Nintex is asking me $1,000 for a workflow. That's crazy, I don't think how is that model going to work? So I just want to throw all those details and see, like, what is the community is thinking. Are you guys experiencing same thing like what I'm doing?
We're in the process of doing that at Allstate right now. And what we've found is that any site that uses Nintex, we're holding off until the end of the migration. What they're doing, we've purchased a short license for Nintex 365, and then translating them and telling the site owners, okay, we've done the best we can. If you have any questions, we can help you a little bit with Flow.
Am I hearing you guys both right? I think I'd heard this first report, back in September, that Nintex going into the cloud was actually trying to force customers into a license per workflow. Am I hearing you right?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a subscription model. For every workflow which has more than 5 actions, the market license cost is $1,000. So, for example, if I have like 100 workflows in my SharePoint site, 6 actions, I got to spend like $100,000.
That's a huge. Wow, I wonder where that's going to go.
Yeah, I don't. See, again, license is one piece, but other thing is like it's a rework that we need to do. Today everything is done. It's not one-on-one mapping. It's not like lift and shift and boom, everything is going to work in cloud. Just to give you guys
So
an idea, like
they're charging you $1,000 and there's still work to be done?
definitely yes. And that's why we need to bring other consulting companies to do that remediation slash rework.
I see this having a big focus coming up in the next session where we're going to talk about what some of the challenges that people are facing is, specifically if you've got workflows more than 5 tasks inside and you're getting dinged like this, are there options that could actually be considered? I'm making a note of that for the upcoming February session. You guys, I'm seeing that we're hitting really close to our stopping time, 12:57. I'm going to push forward on the last 2 slides just to talk about. Well, we already dove into BYOP, and Abbas, I am so pleased you brought this up today, because the bring your own problem is one of the key facets of this entire user group. And the fact that you exercised your desire to talk about that pleases me immensely. Thank you for that. Watch for us to respond to it. Maybe not in today's session, but in the upcoming session, heck, even in the Office 365 Chicago that's coming up. Everybody else looking ahead, next session, I believe it's February 13th, all the regular stuff, plus we're going to also continue talking more about PowerApps and SharePoint, quite all right, lessons from the trenches, things that I've been working on, some of my other teammates and colleagues have been working on, lessons learned, things to do well, things to watch out for. We're going to start diving into that Angular 7 SPA. Abbas, we're going to start digging into, I don't even know how to give it a title, how to deal with licensing run amok from Nintex wanting to change that licensing model, and is there something you can do?
It's just not Nintex, Mark. Like the same thing with Quick Apps. I'll just give you an idea. Like today, like Quick Apps is enterprise license is 25 grand. Tomorrow they're asking for one web part. Quick Apps has like 20 web parts. For one web part, they're asking like 20 grand.
Yikes! Everybody's trying to stick it to everybody else based on perceived functionality and need. Always frustrating. I don't have any answers for you here. I just got done doing a weekend-long upgrade of Nintex for a customer, but it was all on premises for Nintex. I can't speak knowledgeably about shifting over into the cloud and the licensing. But by the February 13th session, I promise I will be more knowledgeable, and we're going to talk about what other options are. I still see that we've got a couple of outstanding questions here. I'll just read them out loud. AT&T is saying they're still on SharePoint 2013 on-premise. What about leveraging forms for basic forms compatibility? Dennis, Microsoft continues to experiment with Microsoft Forms, but I swear to you, where everybody seems to be focusing is single-page applications, leveraging the SharePoint APIs, and going some kind of a route like Angular, the newer versions of Angular. I mean Angular 7, that they're setting themselves up for the next half decade at least, that what they're building is actually going to be compatible and able to survive any changes and decisions that Microsoft makes. Let's see, question from Songmei, is PowerApp, yep, too many questions now, is PowerApp now web responsive? Short answer is it's always been to a point, but they haven't got out of the handcuffs they put on themselves where you're building either a phone-based, like a portrait-based app, or a landscape-based app. I haven't heard any updates on that. I'll have one for you in February. Dennis asks, when we migrated to SharePoint Online, we intentionally flattened all the sites during the migration. Great. Sounds like you're poisoning yourself for the hub sites. Mike, I think we need another tour of hub sites even for February. What do you think? I think that's going to require multiple visits, looking at hub site redesigning, remodeling your structures, using a hub site model, best practices, do's, don'ts, things that are intuitive, things that are not intuitive, but need to be a part of your design. And let's see, Dan Marcus, not going online, better to have a flat architecture. Always better to have a flat. I wouldn't even call it flat, Dan. I would say Microsoft's fundamental building block from the day it was first created was the site collection. They never in a million years envisioned that people would have one single site collection made up of myriad sub-sites, hundreds, even thousands of sub-sites. It was never their idea. Their idea was that you were going to have 1,000 site collections that are all loosely coupled to each other horizontally. They're all siblings of each other, because that was the building block that actually defined a content database. That's what gave you the scalability, was to have myriad site collections. If you go back in time to even My Sites when they first came up, every My Site was its own site collection. That's how important, how fundamental it was to Microsoft. That's how much they were so convinced that that was the ideal building block and not stuff subsites inside subsites inside subsites. And now they're returning back to that with the idea of hub sites up in the cloud, and we're going to continue to see Microsoft mature that model by coming up with this ability to subscribe or publish changes out to all things like look and feel, like object, metadata models and stuff like that, so that you do have some level of inheritance, even though you don't have a nested structure. And guys, that's all I got. Fantastic first session. We ended up with 21 people coming today. We had great first speakers. You guys watch for Craig's new users group and Michael's upcoming group and all of the other stuff that's coming in April and May. And we'll see you on February 13th. Whew.
Good job.
That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mark.
Everybody. We'll be posting the recording and we'll shoot everybody out an email.
Ofer, great output today. You and I got to talk more about Angular 7.